Last spring, my wife collapsed among the white azaleas she loved so much. I remember shouting her name, hearing the paramedics say she had a stroke. That's what I believed. That's what everyone believed. 1 week after we buried her, I received a call from her doctor. There's something you need to see. Come alone. Don't bring your daughter. This concerns your safety. When I walked into his office and saw the file on his desk, I was stunned into silence. If what he was telling me was true, then I might be their next target. Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. It genuinely means a lot that you chose to spend your time with this story. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments so we can see how far this story is traveling. Also, please keep in mind, parts of this story have been thoughtfully dramatized for reflection and storytelling impact. Any similarities to actual names or places are purely coincidental. But the message I'm sharing with you is one I believe can make a difference. When my wife collapsed in our garden last spring, everyone assumed it was a stroke. I believed it. The doctors confirmed it. It seemed simple. Tragic, but simple. Then 7 days after we laid her in the ground, her doctor called me and shattered that simplicity. Mr. Whitfield, doctor. Charles Brennan said, his tone strained in a way I had never heard before. I need you to come to my office. Right away. There's something in Helen's lab results that doesn't add up. He hesitated, like he was choosing his next words carefully. Do not bring your daughter. Do not bring her husband. Come alone. This concerns your safety. Your safety. I sat behind the wheel of my truck, staring at my phone as if it might explain itself. Helen was already gone. What more could possibly be taken from me? I didn't understand yet how much worse it could get. But to explain that call, I need to go back. My name is Clayton Whitfield. I'm 58 years old. I spent 25 years managing construction projects across Richmond, Virginia, bridges, municipal buildings, developments that still stand solid against time. Before that, I served 20 years in the Air Force, specializing in base engineering and structural systems. I've built foundations. I've inspected weaknesses. I've prevented collapse before it happened. What I never learned was how to detect fractures inside my own home. Helen had been my North Star for 37 years. We married young. She was 19, I was 21, and we grew up together. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'3", but she carried herself with quiet strength. When she laughed, a room changed. For 15 years, she worked as personal accountant to Judge Harrison Caldwell, one of Richmond's wealthiest and most influential men. She oversaw his investments, property portfolios, charitable foundations. Every cent was accounted for under her watch. She had an instinct for numbers, precision, order. She managed our household the same way. Careful savings, thoughtful planning. We were on track for a comfortable retirement because of her discipline. I trusted her completely, and I failed to protect her. Last spring arrived heavy with color and heat. The white azaleas Helen planted along the walkway were just beginning to bloom. She loved those flowers, said they reminded her of wedding gowns, of beginnings and promises. It was a Wednesday in early April. Helen sat at the kitchen table with her coffee laptop, open, sunlight catching in her hair. She looked exhausted. She'd looked exhausted for months. Morning, I said, leaning down to kiss her temple. Lavender shampoo. Always lavender. Morning, she answered, eyes still on the screen. You okay? Just tired, she said. Didn't sleep much. That had become her refrain. Restless nights. Racing thoughts. She told me stress kept her awake. I accepted that explanation because it was easier than questioning it. I left for work at 6:30. That was the last time I ever saw my wife conscious. At 11:47, my phone rang while I was reviewing blueprints on site. Mr. Whitfield, this is Richmond General Hospital. Your wife has been brought in by ambulance. You need to come immediately. The emergency room consultation room was sterile and painfully quiet. White walls, metal chairs, a box of tissues placed neatly on the table like they expected what was coming. "I'm very sorry," the physician said. "Your wife suffered a catastrophic stroke. By the time paramedics arrived, there was extensive brain damage. She never regained consciousness. 56 years old. She didn't smoke, hardly drank. Walked 3 miles every morning. Was she being treated for high blood pressure?" the doctor asked. "Yes," I said. "Digoxin." He nodded, made notes, offered condolences. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the corridor, someone else was crying. I waited for my own tears to come, but they didn't. I felt emptied out, like someone had scooped everything from inside my chest. An hour later, Rebecca arrived with her husband, Trevor. I had to tell my daughter her mother was gone. I watched her collapse into sobs, her knees buckling beneath her. I caught her before she hit the floor. Trevor stood behind her, steadying her shoulders. His expression remained controlled, measured. His Rolex flashed under the hospital lights as he checked the time once, twice again. The scent of his cologne cut sharply through the antiseptic air. I had never trusted Trevor, not from the first handshake. But Helen loved our daughter, and our daughter loved him. So I tolerated him. Helen, however, had always been sharper. "That man has a calculator where his heart should be," she once told me. "Rebecca will see it eventually." She never did. The days that followed blurred into logistics. Casket selections, flower arrangements, drafting an obituary. Pastor Matthew Collins from St. Paul's Episcopal Church came by to discuss the service. Church members delivered casseroles and sympathy cards I barely opened. Gerald Thompson, my closest friend since our Air Force days, moved into our guest room without asking. He made sure I ate, made sure I slept, made sure I didn't unravel completely. I drifted through those days like a man underwater, signed paperwork, shook hands, nodded at condolences. But I wasn't really present. Part of me had stayed in that garden with Helen. The funeral was set for Saturday at Hollywood Cemetery beneath the oak trees, where 5 generations of her family rested. Helen had chosen her plot years earlier next to her mother. She liked planning ahead. She liked control. She planned everything except her own murder. But I didn't know that yet. On Friday night, alone in our bedroom on Monument Avenue, I sat on the edge of the bed, holding one of Helen's sweaters. I pressed it to my face, breathing in what little remained of her perfume. I believed the worst had already happened. I believed lowering her into the ground would be the hardest thing I would ever endure. I had no idea it was only the beginning. The morning we buried Helen, the Virginia heat was already brutal by 9 a.m. Spring in Richmond heat meant temperatures that climbed into the 80s before noon, humidity thick enough to choke on. I stood at the edge of the grave in my black suit, the same one Helen had bought me for our 40th anniversary 3 years ago. The fabric felt like sandpaper against my skin. Hollywood Cemetery sprawled across the hills, overlooking the James River, a place where the wealthy and prominent of Richmond had been buried for over 150 years. Ancient oak trees provided patches of shade, their branches draped with Spanish moss that swayed in the slight breeze. Helen's family had plots here going back 5 generations. She'd picked out her spot 2 decades ago, right next to her mother, under a massive oak that had to be 300 years old. The casket gleamed white in the morning sun. White roses covered the lid. Her favorite. I'd made sure of that. White roses for the woman who'd planted white azaleas along our walkway. White for hope, she'd said. White for new beginnings. There were about 40 people gathered around the grave. Neighbors from Monument Avenue. Friends from church. Judge Harrison Caldwell stood in the back, his face grave. Some of Helen's colleagues from the accounting firm she'd worked with before taking the position with the judge. My buddy Gerald Thompson stood beside me, solid and silent, a hand on my shoulder. Pastor Matthew Collins from St. Paul's Episcopal Church stood at the head of the casket, his prayer book open. He was a good man, had baptized Rebecca. 36 years ago, had counseled Helen and me through some rough patches early in our marriage. The Lord is my shepherd. He began, his voice steady and strong. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. I'd heard the 23rd Psalm at a dozen funerals. It had never meant much to me before. But standing there watching them lower my wife into the ground, the words felt different. Personal. Raw. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I wasn't so sure about that part. I was pretty sure I was going to fear everything now. The sound of expensive shoes on gravel made several heads turn. I didn't need to look. I recognized the rhythm of those footsteps, the particular way Trevor Hartley walked, like he owned every space he entered. Rebecca and Trevor arrived 15 minutes late. My daughter wore a black dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. Dark sunglasses covered half her face despite the shade from the oak trees. She carried a designer purse, the kind with a logo that screamed money. Her heels sank into the soft earth with each step. Trevor wore a tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, black tie, but it was the accessories that caught my attention. The Rolex on his wrist caught the sunlight and threw little sparks across the mourners. That cologne, thick and cloying, reached me even from 20 feet away. It was the kind of scent that cost more than my truck payment. They slid into the space beside me without a word. Rebecca didn't touch my arm, didn't squeeze my hand, didn't acknowledge me at all. She just stood there, face hidden behind those oversized sunglasses, while Trevor checked his watch. Once, twice, 3 times in the span of 2 minutes. I glanced at him. His jaw was tight. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the shade. His eyes kept darting around the gathering like he was looking for someone. Or maybe looking for an exit. Pastor Collins continued reading. I tried to focus on the words on the ceremony, on saying goodbye to the woman I'd loved for 37 years. But I kept getting distracted by the man standing next to me, by the way he kept checking that damn watch, by the way my daughter wouldn't even look at the casket where her mother lay. When the service ended, we moved to the fellowship hall at St. Paul's Church. The building was only 10 minutes from the cemetery, a beautiful old structure with stained glass windows and white columns. The fellowship hall was in the basement, a large room with folding tables and metal chairs. The ladies' auxiliary had outdone themselves. Long tables covered with white tablecloths held enough food to feed an army. Fried chicken still warm from the fryer. Collard greens cooked with ham hocks. Macaroni and cheese in casserole dishes. Cornbread cut into perfect squares. Green bean casserole. Sweet potato pie. Pound cake. Sweet tea in giant dispensers. The smells of my childhood. The tastes of comfort. Food that said home, that said family, that said the South. But my stomach was a knot of grief and something else. Something I couldn't name yet. Something that made the food smell wrong, made the chatter of voices feel too loud, made the fluorescent lights seem too bright. I sat in a folding chair in the corner, accepting condolences. Mrs. Henderson from next door squeezed my hand. She was a good woman, Clayton. The best. Mr. Carlson from down the street nodded. Anything you need, you call. Judge Caldwell bent down his voice low. Helen was irreplaceable. If there's anything I can do. I nodded, shook hands, said thank you over and over until the words lost meaning. My hearing aids were turned up high. Most people assumed I was half deaf, which was fine by me. The truth was I could control the volume, turn it up to catch conversations across a room, turn it down when I needed quiet. Right now, I had them cranked up all the way. That's how I heard the conversation happening near the punch bowl, maybe 15 feet away. Trevor and Rebecca stood with their backs to me, their heads close together. To anyone watching, they might have looked like a grieving daughter and her supportive husband sharing a private moment, but I could hear every word. "When can we get into the house?" Trevor's voice was low, urgent. "Not yet," Rebecca hissed back. "We have to wait until the reading of the will." "When's that?" Dr. Patterson said next week. "The lawyer's going to..." "Next week." Trevor grabbed her elbow, his fingers digging into her arm hard enough to make her wince. I saw it even from across the room. "I don't have until next week. Dominic called again this morning. He's not patient, Rebecca. He doesn't do payment plans." "Lower your voice," she snapped, pulling her arm free. "People are looking." I turned my head slowly, pretending to admire a flower arrangement that someone had set on the table beside me, but I kept my ears focused on that conversation, on those urgent whispers that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with money. Through my peripheral vision, I watched them. Trevor's face was flushed red, creeping up from his collar. Sweat had soaked through his shirt under the arms. His hands kept clenching and unclenching. Rebecca's jaw was tight, her fingers white-knuckled around a plastic cup of sweet tea. I'd seen that look before. I'd seen it on the faces of men in Vietnam who were surrounded with no way out. It was the look of desperation. It was the look of people who'd run out of options. The fellowship hall began to empty. People came to shake my hand one last time to tell me Helen was in a better place. I nodded, thanked them. Let them believe I was just a grieving old man who couldn't hear half of what they said, but I heard everything. And I was starting to understand that something was very, very wrong. I moved slowly across the fellowship hall using my cane more than I needed to. People expected an old man to move slowly at his wife's funeral. They expected grief to weigh him down. What they didn't expect was that old man to be listening to every word. There was a flower arrangement near the punch bowl, white lilies and roses. I made my way toward it, stopping to accept handshakes. Another, "I'm so sorry for your loss." But my hearing aids were turned up all the way, and my focus was entirely on the two people standing with their backs to me, hunched together like conspirators. "I'm serious, Rebecca," Trevor hissed. "Dominic called me at 6 this morning. You know what that means." "I know." Rebecca's voice was tight. "But the will reading is next Thursday. I can't access anything until then." "Thursday, that's 10 days away. The deadline is Friday. This Friday, 5 days from now." I reached the flowers, bent down as if examining the card, kept my face turned away. "How much does he want?" Rebecca asked. "All of it. $560,000. By 5 p.m. Friday. $560,000. That wasn't mortgage debt. That was gambling trouble. The kind that broke men. And if you don't pay..." He was very clear. Trevor's hand went to his ribs, a quick, unconscious gesture. "Dominic doesn't make threats he won't follow through on. His people already reminded me." So Trevor had been roughed up. That explained the careful way he'd been moving. "But the house," Rebecca said. "Mom's half is worth at least $300,000, and her life insurance through Judge Caldwell's office, that's $2.5 million. We can't touch any of it until probate," Trevor cut her off. "Which takes months. Dominic doesn't wait months." "There's the safe," Rebecca said. "Mom kept cash in the house, an emergency fund, at least 20 or 30,000. Where?" "I don't know, but Dad might." I could feel them looking in my direction. I kept my face toward the flowers, shoulders hunched. "He's useless right now," Trevor said, dismissive. "Look at him. He can barely stand." "He's my father," Rebecca said, but there was no conviction in her voice. He's in the way. Trevor's voice went cold. But maybe we can use that. Power of attorney. We access the accounts, liquidate what we can. It won't be enough, but it'll buy us time. He won't sign. He's stubborn. Everyone signs eventually. You just have to find the right leverage. I'd heard enough. I straightened, slowly picked up the flower arrangement and turned toward them. Their faces changed instantly. Trevor's expression smoothed into sympathy. Rebecca wiped at her eyes like she'd been crying. "Dad," Rebecca said, her voice catching. She reached out, but I stepped past her, setting the flowers down. "Rebecca, Trevor." I kept my voice flat. "Well, thank you for coming." "Of course," Rebecca said. "She was my mother." Was, past tense. 3 days dead, and already she was talking about life insurance and house values. "We were just talking about practical matters," Trevor said, moving closer. His hand landed on my shoulder. "Your wife managed all the finances, didn't she? You probably don't even know what accounts you have. We want to help. Take that burden off your shoulders." I looked at him. Really looked. At the expensive watch. At the $3,000 suit. At the sweat beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. This was a desperate man. A dangerous man. "That's kind of you," I said slowly. "But I'll manage." "Dad, you don't have to do this alone," Rebecca said, moving to my other side. Suddenly I was flanked by both of them, boxed in. "Mom would want us to help you." Would she? Would the woman who'd managed Judge Caldwell's accounts for 15 years want her daughter and son-in-law getting their hands on everything we'd built? "I appreciate the concern, but I need to go home." "Let us drive you," Trevor offered. "I have my truck." "You shouldn't be driving. You're in shock." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. Some people turned to look. "I need to be alone." I turned and walked toward the exit, moving faster than I had all day. My cane clicked against the linoleum. Behind me I could hear them talking, their voices rising before someone shushed them. The parking lot was half empty now. I climbed into my 1995 Ford F-150 and sat there for a moment. My hands were shaking. Not from grief, from rage, from the crystal-clear understanding that my daughter and her husband weren't here to mourn. They were here to scavenge. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. The screen was cracked, but I could read the name. Dr. Charles Brennan. I almost didn't answer. I'd just buried my wife and discovered my daughter was circling like a vulture, but something in my gut said answer. That same instinct that had kept me alive in Vietnam was screaming at me to answer that phone. I pressed the green button. "Clayton." "Doctor." Brennan's voice was different now. This wasn't a condolence call. "We need to talk. Not on the phone. Can you come to my office now?" Now I just left my wife's funeral. "I know. I'm sorry. But I just got the lab results back. The full toxicology panel." My blood went cold. "And..." He paused. I could hear him breathing, could hear the tension in that breath. "Helen didn't die from a stroke, Clayton. Someone poisoned her. And based on what I'm seeing, it had to be someone close to her. Someone who had regular access to her food and medication." The parking lot spun around me. I gripped the steering wheel. "I'm on my way." I hung up, started the truck. And as I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in my rearview mirror. Trevor and Rebecca were standing at the church entrance, watching me leave. I climbed into my truck, gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. Dr. Charles Brennan's name lit up the screen. His message was 2 sentences. Clayton, come to my office immediately. Your life may depend on it. I drove across Richmond with the windows down, letting the hot Virginia air blast against my face. I needed to feel something real. Someone poisoned her. The words kept repeating. Someone poisoned Helen. Someone close to her. The medical building was on the east side of town, a small brick structure near the hospitals. I parked in the handicapped spot, my veteran plates giving me the right. The waiting room was empty. The receptionist's desk was dark. No one here except me, and whatever waited behind the door marked private. I pushed through without knocking. Dr. Charles Brennan sat at his desk, but he wasn't alone. A man stood by the window, silhouette sharp against the afternoon sun. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray suit. His face was weathered with deep lines around his eyes. "Clayton, doctors," Brennan said, standing. His hands were trembling. In 15 years, I'd never seen Charles Brennan's hands shake. "This is Detective Christopher Blake, Major Crimes Unit." Major Crimes. The detective turned to face me. His eyes were gunmetal gray, cold, but not unkind. Professional. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, extending his hand. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm even more sorry for what I'm about to tell you." I shook his hand. "Tell me." Dr. Brennan pushed a folder across the desk. Pages of medical jargon, charts, numbers, but one word jumped out, circled in red. Digoxin. "Helen was on digoxin," I said. "You prescribed it." "I did," Dr. Brennan said. 2 years ago, for her high blood pressure. It's a cardiac glycoside, a heart medication that helps regulate heart rhythm and lower blood pressure. Very common, very safe when taken properly." He pulled out another sheet. "I prescribed 0.25 milligrams, once daily. That's the standard maintenance dose." "So what's the problem?" Detective Blake stepped forward. He pointed to the toxicology report. "This number here, this is the therapeutic range for digoxin in the bloodstream. 0.5 to 2 nanograms per milliliter. That's the safe zone, the effective zone." He tapped another number circled in red. "And this is what was in Helen's blood when she passed away." 8.3, I read. 8.3 nanograms per milliliter, Blake said. 4 to 5 times higher than therapeutic levels. At those concentrations, digoxin becomes a poison. The room felt cold despite the Virginia heat outside. "That's enough to—" "Yes, doctor," Brennan said quietly. "At those levels, digoxin causes severe cardiac arrhythmias. The heart loses its ability to pump effectively. But before that happens, it mimics other conditions. Confusion, nausea, extreme fatigue, slurred speech, loss of coordination." I thought about the last 6 months. Helen stumbling in the kitchen, grabbing the counter for support, not remembering what day it was, complaining about a bitter taste in her mouth. I'd blamed it on age, on stress. "The symptoms were intermittent," I said slowly, "because she wasn't given one massive dose," Blake said. "Someone was poisoning her slowly, a little at a time, sustained over months, meant to look like natural decline, like a stroke." "How long?" "Based on medical records, Helen started complaining about confusion and weakness in February," Dr. Brennan said. "She came in 3 times between then and April. I ran standard tests, blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose. Everything looked normal, except her digoxin levels were slightly elevated, but not dangerously so. I attributed it to her body adjusting to the medication." "You didn't suspect poisoning?" "No." His voice broke. "I should have. But the symptoms were consistent with hypertension, stress, age. I prescribed a mild sedative. Told her to rest more, to drink tea instead of coffee. He put his head in his hands. I told her to drink more tea. Digoxin poisoning is extremely difficult to diagnose, Blake said. The symptoms overlap with dozens of other conditions. High blood pressure, anxiety, early dementia. It's why digoxin has been used as a murder weapon for over 200 years. It hides in plain sight. Murder weapon. The words hit like a physical blow. Who? I asked. Blake looked at Dr. Brennan. Neither wanted to say it. Clayton, Dr. Brennan said carefully. Helen came to see me a month before she lost. March 20th. Not about her health, about something else. She was worried about money, discrepancies in her personal accounts, large withdrawals she didn't authorize. My blood went cold. How much? Over 2 years, nearly $500,000 had been withdrawn or transferred from her accounts. Some from your joint savings, most from her personal investment account, the inheritance from her father. $500,000. She traced the transactions. The authorization forms had her signature on them, but Helen knew her own signature. These were forgeries. Who? Dr. Brennan's hands clenched on the desk. She recognized the handwriting. It was Rebecca's. The room tilted. I grabbed the desk edge. No, Rebecca wouldn't. Helen was gathering evidence, Dr. Brennan said gently. Bank statements, copies of the forged documents. She contacted Judge Harrison Caldwell 3 weeks before she lost. She was planning to press criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, forgery. But someone found out, Blake said, didn't they? I stared at the toxicology report, at the numbers in red. Digoxin, 8.3, 4 to 5 times the therapeutic dose. The life insurance policy through Judge Caldwell's office lists you as primary beneficiary, Blake continued. $2.5 million. But Rebecca is listed as secondary beneficiary. If you were to pass away or be declared legally incompetent, she inherits everything. The house, the savings, the insurance money. $2.5 million. And that's enough to pay off any debt, Blake said quietly. Enough to disappear and start over. I thought about the funeral. Trevor checking his Rolex. Rebecca on her phone. The whispered conversation near the punch bowl. $560,000. By Friday. Trevor has gambling debts, I said. My voice sounded distant. I overheard them at the church after the funeral. $560,000 owed to someone named Dominic. They need it by Friday, or I stopped. They need to access Helen's accounts. They want me to sign a power of attorney. Blake's eyes sharpened. What else did you hear? That I'm confused. That I'm in the way. That they need to move quickly. Blake and Brennan exchanged a long look. Mr. Whitfield, Blake said carefully, do you feel safe in your home right now? I thought about Trevor's hands. Large, strong, the way he'd positioned himself between me and the door at the fellowship hall. About Rebecca's cold calculation when she thought I wasn't watching. No, I admitted. Detective Blake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small evidence bag. Inside was something that looked like a voice recorder barely bigger than a lighter. Mr. Whitfield, he said quietly, his voice heavy with something between sympathy and steel. We need to talk about your daughter. Detective Blake spread the pharmacy receipts across Dr. Brennan's desk, like a poker hand revealing a killer's tell. CVS Pharmacy on West Broad Street, Walgreens on Patterson Avenue, Rite Aid in Henrico County. His finger moved from receipt to receipt. 7 refills of Helen's digoxin prescription in 6 months. 3 different pharmacies. all under Rebecca Hartley's name. I stared at the papers. The dates jumped out at me. February, March, April, May. The months Helen had been dying. That's not unusual, I said, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. Not Helen had high blood pressure. She needed her medication. Mr. Whitfield. Blake's tone was patient but firm. Helen's primary care physician prescribed 1 refill every 3 months. That's the standard protocol for digoxin maintenance therapy. 4 refills per year, not 7, and certainly not from 3 different pharmacies. Why would someone use 3 different pharmacies? Because, Blake said quietly. A pharmacist might notice if the same person keeps refilling the same prescription too frequently at one location. They might flag it. Ask questions. Call the prescribing physician. But spread across 3 different pharmacies in 3 different neighborhoods, no one notices the pattern. The cold calculation of it hit me like a fist. Doctor, Brennan pulled a leather-bound journal from his desk drawer. His hands still trembled as he opened it. Helen kept detailed notes about her symptoms, he said. She was meticulous. When something felt wrong, she documented it. He turned the journal toward me. Helen's handwriting, small, precise, engineer perfect, filled the pages. January 12th. Tea tastes bitter today. Rebecca brought chamomile from that shop she likes. February 3rd. Medication has unusual taste. Metallic will mention to Dr. B. March 18th. Rebecca visits every Sunday now. Always brings tea. Sweet girl, but something feels off. April 2nd, dizzy again. Rebecca made tea before she left. Slept 14 hours. I couldn't breathe. The office walls seemed to close in. She knew, I whispered. Helen knew something was wrong. She suspected, Blake said, but she didn't want to believe it. No mother wants to believe her daughter is capable of harming her. He pulled out another folder. This one was thicker, filled with bank statements and canceled checks. 2 years ago, Helen discovered $150,000 missing from your joint savings account. According to Judge Harrison Caldwell, Helen's employer, she contacted him about the theft. Blake paused, but she didn't press charges. She told the judge she'd given Rebecca one more chance. She used her own inheritance money to cover the loss. I remembered that conversation. Helen had come to me crying. She made a mistake, Clayton. People make mistakes. She promised to pay it back. But Rebecca never paid it back. 18 months ago, Blake continued, $340,000 disappeared. This time from Helen's personal investment account, money she'd inherited from her father. Rebecca had power of attorney from the first incident. He tapped the bank statements. Helen caught her again. This time she called Judge Caldwell and said she was filing criminal charges. That was 1 year ago this month. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. No, that's when the poisoning started, I said. We believe so. Small amounts of digoxin added to her food or drink. The levels would have built up gradually in her system. At first, Helen would have just felt tired, confused, maybe a little nauseous. Symptoms that could be attributed to stress or age. By the time she collapsed in your garden, her blood had 4 to 5 times the normal therapeutic concentration. Dr. Brennan closed the journal, but his finger remained on one entry. I should have listened. She told me the tea tasted wrong. The medication tasted different. I thought... His voice cracked. I thought she was imagining things. Side effects of the digoxin itself, maybe. Or just getting older. I failed her. No, Blake said firmly. Rebecca and Trevor failed her. They planned this. They executed it, and they almost got away with it. Almost. Blake leaned forward. Evidence alone won't convict them, Mr. Whitfield. A good defense attorney could argue Helen was accidentally taking too much medication, that the pharmacy records show Rebecca was just helping her confused mother manage prescriptions. We need a confession. We need them to incriminate themselves on record. My stomach dropped. You want me to wear a wire? A recording device, small, discreet, size of a lighter. He pulled a tiny black box from his jacket pocket. You'd engage them in conversation, get them talking about the money, about Helen, about their plans. They think you're confused, grieving, vulnerable. Use that. 20 years in the Air Force had taught me to assess risk. 2 combat deployments in hostile territory had taught me to keep my head when violence lurked around every corner. But this was different. This was my daughter, my home. They're dangerous, I said. They've already taken 1 life, Blake acknowledged. That's why I'll have officers monitoring from a surveillance van parked down the street. You'll have a panic signal say, Helen's azaleas in any sentence, and we come in immediately. You won't be alone. What if they search me? Find the device. Then you're a paranoid old man who bought a personal recorder after his wife passed away because you're afraid you're losing your memory. Play confused. Lean into the grief. Blake's eyes held mine. I know this isn't easy, but they're planning something. The $560,000 debt. The Friday deadline. They need money fast, and you're the obstacle between them and a $2.5 million life insurance policy. I thought about Helen's journal, her careful documentation, her hope that she was wrong about our daughter. She'd been right. When do we do this? Blake handed me a burner phone along with the recording device. They'll come to the house, probably tonight or tomorrow. They'll want to pressure you about the power of attorney, about accessing Helen's accounts. Let them talk. Let them threaten. Get everything on record. I slipped the device into my shirt pocket. It felt cold against my chest, a small weight that carried the power to destroy what was left of my family. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, I said. 2 deployments in combat zones. I can handle my own house. I don't doubt that, Mr. Whitfield. But remember, this isn't a combat zone. It's a crime scene. And the enemy looks like your family. I drove home as the sun began its descent, painting the Virginia sky in shades of orange and purple. The recording device pressed against my chest, like a second heartbeat. The house on Monument Avenue had never looked so menacing. Somewhere inside those walls, Helen had drunk poisoned tea, had felt her body betraying her, had known in her last lucid moments that her daughter was responsible. And now I was going to prove it. I turned onto Monument Avenue as the streetlights flickered on one by one. The recording device pressed cold against my chest with every breath. 3 blocks away from home. 2 blocks. 1. Then I saw it. My front door, Helen's blue door with the brass knocker she'd picked out in Williamsburg 20 years ago, stood half open in the fading light. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The truck slowed to a crawl. Every instinct from 20 years in the Air Force screamed at me to call for backup, to not enter alone, to treat this like the hostile situation it clearly was. But Detective Blake's voice echoed in my head. Let them talk. Get everything on record. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. The porch light was off. I always left it on. The evening air felt thick as I climbed out, one hand gripping my cane. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Normal Saturday sounds. Families having dinner, no one watching an old man walk into his own violated home. I pushed the door open wider. The living room stopped me cold. Couch cushions, slashed open white stuffing scattered across the hardwood. Helen had refinished herself. Books swept from shelves. Her mystery novels, my engineering manuals, the photo albums we'd kept for 37 years. Helen's porcelain figurines lay shattered across the coffee table. The shepherdess from Charleston, the bluebirds from Asheville. 3 decades of memories broken. Then I heard it. Metal on metal. The sharp crack of something being pried open. The sound came from down the hall. From our bedroom. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting my cane tap a steady rhythm. My pulse hammered, but my breathing stayed controlled. Assess the threat. Maintain the advantage. They thought I was confused, weak, grieving. Let them keep thinking that. The bedroom door stood wide open. Evening light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across Helen's antique oak dresser. Every drawer hung open, contents dumped on the floor. Her jewelry box overturned, photographs scattered like leaves. Trevor knelt in front of the wall, safe behind the dresser, a crowbar jammed into the seam between the door and frame. Sweat darkened his expensive polo shirt. His Rolex caught the dying light as he strained against the lever. Rebecca stood at Helen's dresser, rifling through the bottom drawer where we kept important papers. Birth certificates, insurance policies, the deed to the house. They were so focused, they didn't hear my approach. I cleared my throat. Trevor spun around, crowbar raised like a weapon. Rebecca's hand flew to her chest. For 3 long heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Trevor lowered the crowbar and forced a smile. Clayton, Jesus, you scared us. I let myself lean heavily on the cane shoulders, slumping. I thought we were being robbed. No. Trevor crossed the room too quickly, stopping just inside my personal space. The cologne was overwhelming. We're protecting family assets. Dominic's people are watching the house. We needed to secure the cash before they break in. Rebecca stepped forward, voice honey sweet. We tried calling Daddy. You didn't answer. She'd never called me Daddy, always Dad or just Clayton when she was angry. We were so worried. I blinked slowly, playing my part. I was at Dr. Brennan's office. Something about Helen's blood work. I can't remember what he said. They exchanged a glance. Quick, nervous. We need the safe combination, Trevor said. His tone had shifted, less apologetic, more demanding. Your mother kept $30,000 cash in there. Emergency fund. We need to move it before the creditors come. I don't know the combination. I let my voice crack. Helen handled all the finances, the numbers, the accounts. I can't think straight anymore. Everything's so foggy. It wasn't entirely performance. Standing in our bedroom, seeing Helen's things scattered like garbage, the grief was real enough. Rebecca touched my arm, her grip firm. Oh, Daddy, of course you're confused. You've been through so much. She guided me toward the door. Why don't you rest, Trevor, and I will stay tonight. We'll take care of everything. You'll stay. I let hope creep into my voice, made myself sound like a frightened old man who didn't want to be alone. I don't want to be in this house by myself. We're family, Rebecca said softly. Family takes care of each other. Behind her, Trevor was already back at the safe, examining the lock mechanism with professional interest. I'll call a locksmith tomorrow morning. Get this thing open properly. I shuffled toward the guest bedroom, cane tapping. There are clean sheets in the linen closet. Helen always kept. I let the sentence die, touching the doorframe like I'd forgotten what I meant to say. We'll find them, Rebecca assured me. You just rest now. I closed the guest room door and stood very still in the darkness. Their voices carried through the thin walls. Old house. Original construction from 1892. Every sound traveled. The old man's completely lost it, Rebecca whispered. Did you see his face? He doesn't suspect us. I lay in the darkness of that guest room and listened to my daughter plan to harm me. The house settled around me with familiar sounds. Helen used to say old houses talk if you listen. The creak of floorboards, the whisper of pipes, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tonight my house was telling me I might not see another sunset. I kept my breathing steady, slow, like a man deep in grief-exhausted sleep. The recording device pressed against my ribs under my shirt. Through the thin walls, I heard them moving through the house, opening drawers, testing windows, planning. The bedside clock glowed 11 p.m. Their voices drifted through the walls too low to make out words at first, but the tone was clear, urgent, calculating. Every few minutes, footsteps passed my door. Checking, making sure I stayed put. I thought about the burner phone Detective Blake had given me, hidden under my pillow. One text and the team outside would come crashing in, but Blake's words echoed. We need a confession. Something that will hold up in court. The clock ticked toward midnight. I counted ceiling fan rotations like a prisoner counting days. The blades turned lazy circles in the darkness. 47, 48, 49. Helen used to fall asleep watching that fan spin. It's hypnotic, she'd say. Better than counting sheep. Now I was counting rotations and waiting for my daughter to decide when to act. 1 a.m. came and went. The house quieted. I heard a door close. The creak of bed springs in the master bedroom, my bedroom where Trevor and Rebecca had made themselves at home in the bed Helen lost dreaming of. Maybe they were sleeping now. Maybe I could footsteps in the hallway. I closed my eyes and forced my breathing into the deep rhythmic pattern of sleep. In through the nose, out through barely parted lips, the kind of breathing that comes from a man who's given up fighting consciousness. The footsteps stopped outside my door. My heart hammered so hard I thought surely they'd hear it, but I kept my face slack, my body still. The doorknob turned, slow, testing. The door opened with the faint squeak it always made. I'd been meaning to oil those hinges for 3 years. Helen had asked me twice last month. Light from the hallway spilled across the bed. I felt someone's presence in the doorway, watching, evaluating. He's asleep. Rebecca's whisper barely audible, Trevor's voice from the hallway equally quiet. Keep him that way. We need him alert tomorrow. After he signs the papers, we'll handle the rest. His tone was ice cold. A pause. Then Rebecca, uncertain. What do you mean? He's old. Old people have accidents. Trevor's words came slow and deliberate. Falls. Heart attacks. No one questions it. The door clicked shut. Their footsteps retreated down the hallway. A door closed. Then silence. I lay there in the darkness, rage and terror warring in my chest. My own daughter, standing in my doorway, discussing my death like she was planning a grocery list. Helen would have been devastated. No, Helen had been devastated. That's why she'd documented everything in that journal. Why she'd tried to warn me 5 years ago when Rebecca first brought Trevor home. There's something wrong about him, she'd said. I can feel it. I'd told her she was being overprotective. I waited until the house fell silent again. 2:30 a.m. according to the clock. Then I slid the burner phone from under my pillow and typed out a message to Detective Blake, thumbs clumsy in the darkness. They're planning for tomorrow. Overheard them discussing accident. Need extraction soon. The response came within 60 seconds. Hold position. We're monitoring the house. Lawyer arrives 9 a.m. Let them think they're winning. We need the confession. I typed back, overheard them at my door. Planning accident after I sign papers. Trevor said, old people have accidents. Recording device, getting all of it? Yes. Good. Stay strong, Mr. Whitfield. Sunrise is 4 hours away. We move at 9. 4 hours. I had to survive 4 more hours. I set the phone back under the pillow and stared at the ceiling. The fan blades turned their endless circles. 112. 113. 114. Somewhere in this house in the bed I'd shared with Helen for 37 years, my daughter slept soundly, planning to get rid of me so she could collect insurance money and pay off her husband's debts. The rage that filled me was so pure, it almost burned away the fear. Almost. 3 a.m. 4 a.m. 5 a.m. The sky outside began to lighten. Gray dawn filtered through the curtains. Helen had made herself stitching them by hand because she said store-bought never hung quite right. I heard movement in the kitchen, coffee brewing, the clink of mugs, normal morning sounds from a profoundly abnormal situation. 6 a.m., 7 a.m. I stayed in bed, playing the exhausted, grieving widower who couldn't face another day. Let them think I was broken, confused, easy to manipulate. At 7:45, I finally shuffled out of the guest room, leaning heavily on my cane. Rebecca was in the kitchen brewing coffee like she owned the place. Good morning, Daddy. Did you sleep? A little. I made my voice thin, uncertain. Is the coffee ready? Almost. Her smile was warm, caring, the smile of a dutiful daughter. Vernon Pike called. He'll be here at 9 to help with the paperwork. We'll get everything sorted out. I nodded slowly, like a man too tired to argue. At 8 a.m. exactly, someone knocked on the front door. That knock wasn't at the front door. It was Rebecca rapping softly on the guest bedroom door. Daddy, are you awake? I sat up slowly, making sure she heard the groan of effort. I'm up. The door opened. Rebecca stepped in carrying a breakfast tray like she was playing housewife in some twisted sitcom. Coffee, scrambled eggs, toast with butter, orange juice in a glass Helen had bought at an estate sale 15 years ago. Good morning. Her smile was bright. Too bright. I made breakfast, just the way you like it. She set the tray on the nightstand. The coffee cup steamed dark and aromatic, the kind of bold roast Helen used to make every Sunday morning. I reached for the cup, wrapping both hands around it, let the warmth seep into my palms, brought it close to my face and inhaled. Thank you, sweetheart. This is very thoughtful. Of course. She perched on the edge of the bed watching me. A friend of Trevor's is coming by at 9. A lawyer, Vernon Pike. He's going to help us sort out the estate paperwork. Very routine. I held the cup but didn't drink. That's very efficient of you. We just want to make sure everything's handled properly. You know how complicated these things can get. Her hand touched my arm. Why don't you get dressed? We want you looking your best. I will. She stood smoothing her dress. Take your time. Drink your coffee while it's hot. The door closed behind her. I counted to 30. Then I stood and walked to the window where Helen's potted fern sat on the sill, the one she'd kept alive for 12 years through sheer, stubborn will. I poured the entire cup of coffee into the soil. The liquid disappeared into the dark earth. I thought about Helen's journal entry from March. Rebecca brought tea again, dumped it in the azaleas when she wasn't looking. Something about it doesn't smell right. Helen's azaleas had lost 2 weeks later. Sudden wilt. No explanation. This fern would be dead by tonight. But I wouldn't be. I rinsed the cup in the guest bathroom sink, filled it with water, and drank that instead. Then I got dressed. Khaki slacks, button-down shirt. The outfit of a confused old man trying to look respectable for official business. At 8:55, I shuffled out to the living room leaning on my cane. Trevor was there pacing near the front window, watching the street. His Rolex caught the morning light. The expensive watch of a man who owed $560,000 by Friday. Rebecca emerged from the kitchen. "Would you like more coffee, Daddy?" "No, thank you. I'm fine." At 9 a.m., exactly, the doorbell rang. Vernon Pike looked exactly like what he was, a lawyer who'd given up ethics somewhere around his third divorce. Mid-50s, slick smile, expensive suit that didn't quite fit right, like he'd bought it on sale and never had it tailored. A leather briefcase that probably cost more than my truck. "Mr. Whitfield." He extended his hand. His grip was too firm, too long. "I'm Vernon Pike. I'm here to simplify your life. Come in." I shook his hand weakly, playing my part. Trevor and Rebecca flanked me as we moved to the living room. They positioned themselves on either side of the sofa where I sat, blocking the exits, though they probably thought they were being supportive. Vernon settled into Helen's favorite chair, the one she used to read in every evening. Seeing him there made my jaw clench, but I kept my expression vacant. He opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Now, Mr. Whitfield, I understand you've recently suffered a terrible loss. My condolences." "Thank you." In times like these, legal matters can seem overwhelming. That's why I'm here to make this as painless as possible. He pulled out a stack of documents. "We're going to establish some basic protections for you and your assets." "Protections? Absolutely." His smile widened. "With proper planning, we can ensure your finances are secure and your medical decisions are handled by people you trust." He was good. I'd give him that. The way he made theft and fraud sound like a public service. "What kind of planning?" "Simple things." Vernon laid 3 sets of documents on my coffee table like a dealer spreading cards. "Power of attorney. This allows Rebecca to manage your financial accounts. Very common for elderly individuals who find the day-to-day management overwhelming." I stared at the papers. "I see. A quit-claim deed. This transfers the house into joint ownership with Rebecca. Protects against creditors. Avoids probate complications." Helen had warned me about quit-claim deeds. Never sign one," she'd said. "It's how people steal houses in broad daylight." And finally, a healthcare directive. This ensures Rebecca can make medical decisions on your behalf if you become incapacitated. If, not when. If, as in when they push me down the stairs and I'm lying in a hospital bed, unable to speak, Rebecca gets to decide whether I live or die. "These are big decisions," I said slowly. My hand trembled, not from fear this time, but from rage. "I'm not sure I understand everything." Of course. Vernon's tone was patronizing. "Take your time. Read through them. But I should mention, given the urgency of certain financial obligations, time is somewhat of a factor here." Urgency. Trevor leaned forward. "Clayton Dominic Russo isn't going to wait forever. We need to secure the assets before he takes legal action." "I thought you said the house was only worth $300,000. That's not enough to cover your debt." The room went very quiet. Vernon recovered first. "Mr. Whitfield, I think you're confused about the life insurance," I said softly. $2.5 million. That would cover it, wouldn't it? Rebecca's hand touched mine. "Daddy, you're tired. You're not thinking clearly." I looked at her. Really looked at her. My daughter. Helen's little girl. The child we'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. You're right, I said finally. I'm very tired. Vernon Pike spread the 3 documents across my coffee table like a card dealer laying out a hand. Power of attorney, quitclaim deed, healthcare directive. Just a few signatures, he said smoothly. Then this will all be over. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. Vernon Pike slid it across the coffee table toward me. Expensive. Heavy. The kind of pen meant to sign away fortunes. The power of attorney document stared back at me. Blank signature line. 1 stroke of ink, and Rebecca would control every dollar Helen and I had saved over 37 years. I let my fingers shake visibly as they closed around the pen. Lifted it. Let it hover over the paper. 2 years ago, I'd found Helen sitting at our kitchen table on a Sunday morning with bank statements spread across the wood like evidence at a crime scene. I'd been reading the paper, coffee in hand, expecting a normal day. But nothing about Helen's face had been normal. Clayton. Her voice was hollow. Come look at this. I'd sat down beside her. She pushed the statements toward me. $150,000. Her finger traced the withdrawal lines. Gone. All of it. From the savings account. My chest had tightened. That's impossible. I didn't authorize these transfers. Look at the dates. March, April, May. Small amounts at first, then larger. She'd looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. It was Rebecca. We'd confronted her that afternoon. Right here in this living room where I now sat with a lawyer trying to steal everything we had left. Rebecca had cried like her heart was breaking. Mascara running, hands shaking. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Trevor got into gambling, deep. These men, they threatened him, threatened to hurt him. I didn't know what to do. Helen had pulled her close. Sweetheart, why didn't you come to us? We could have helped. I was ashamed. I thought I could fix it myself. Everyone makes mistakes. Helen's voice had been so gentle, so forgiving. We'll get through this together. Helen had used her inheritance money from her mother, who'd lost 3 years earlier, to cover the debt. Every penny of it. $150,000 gone in an afternoon to save our daughter from her husband's mistakes. Rebecca had hugged Helen so tight. I promise, Mom. I swear. This will never happen again. Never. Helen had believed her. But 1 year ago, I'd found Helen in her home office staring at her computer screen like it had just told her the world was ending. I'd walked in to ask about dinner and stopped cold at the look on her face. Helen? She didn't look up, just pushed the monitor toward me. Her investment account, the one she'd inherited from her father years before that. Her safety net. Her rainy day money, she'd called it. The screen showed a balance of $862. It should have shown $340,000. It's gone. Her voice was flat. Dead. All of it. She did it again. Maybe there's an explanation. She promised Clayton. Helen's eyes had met mine, and I'd seen something break in them. She looked me in the eye and promised, and I believed her. Helen? No. She'd stood suddenly furious. Not this time. This time she learns. This is me loving her enough to teach her consequences. She'd called Judge Harrison Caldwell that afternoon, her employer of 15 years, a man who'd seen countless families torn apart by theft and lies. I want to file charges, Helen had told him. Embezzlement, fraud, whatever applies. I'd heard her crying in our bedroom that night. I'd held her while she sobbed. I'm doing this because I love her. she'd whispered. She'll hate me now, but maybe someday she'll understand. 6 months later, Helen was dead. Mr. Whitfield, Vernon Pike's voice snapped me back to the present. I blinked, realizing I'd been staring at the papers for too long. The pen still hovered above the signature line, my hand still trembling. Are you all right? Rebecca's hand on my shoulder. Concern that would have seemed genuine if I didn't know what she'd done. Why, I need to use the bathroom. Trevor's hand clamped down on my other shoulder. Can it wait? We're almost done here. I looked up at him, let my voice go thin and reedy. I'm an old man with a weak bladder. Do you want me to explain the mechanics of that here? Or would you prefer I handle it privately? Rebecca's face twisted with disgust. Fine, but hurry up. I stood slowly gripping my cane, shuffled across the living room toward the guest bathroom, every step deliberate, feeble. Behind me, Vernon's voice. Perhaps we should take a short break. Let Mr. Whitfield collect himself. I closed the bathroom door, locked it. The click echoed louder than it should have. My hands stopped shaking. I pulled out the burner phone and typed fast. They're getting impatient. Don't know how much longer I can stall. Blake's response came within seconds. Keep going. We need them to mention Helen. Connect themselves to what happened to her. I typed back. How ask about the investigation? About what Dr. Brennan told you. Make them think you know more than you do. Let them panic. Outside the bathroom door, I heard footsteps. Pacing, waiting. I put the phone away, flushed the toilet, ran the water in the sink, letting it run long enough to sound convincing. I opened the door and walked back into the living room. 3 faces turned toward me. Rebecca tried to smile. Trevor's jaw was tight. Vernon Pike checked his watch, expensive, but not as expensive as Trevor's Rolex. I lowered myself onto the sofa, slowly gripping my cane. Let them see an old man who'd barely made it to the bathroom and back. Now then. Vernon arranged the documents again, all business. Where were we? I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I said, I've been thinking about Helen. Dad, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time. My voice shook, but not from fear. From rage I'd been holding back for days. She went so suddenly. The doctor said it was natural causes, but I keep thinking about those last few weeks. Vernon shifted in his seat. Mr. Whitfield, grief is natural, but we really should. How weak she was. I kept talking like he hadn't spoken. How confused. Helen was sharp as a tack her whole life, managed Judge Caldwell's books for 15 years without a single error. Then suddenly she couldn't remember what day it was. Rebecca's hand touched my arm. Daddy, she was sick. That's what happens. She kept saying something was wrong. I pulled my arm away. Said the tea tasted strange, bitter but also sweet, like someone was trying to cover up a bad flavor. The room went very quiet. She said her medication seemed different, tasted metallic. I told her she was imagining things. I looked at Rebecca. I didn't listen. I should have listened. Trevor cleared his throat. Clayton, you're upset. Understandable. But these documents, and then there's the money. I turned to face him directly. $340,000 disappeared from our accounts over the past year. Vernon Pike's briefcase clicked shut. The sound was too loud in the silent room. Forged checks. I recognized the handwriting. Rebecca. It was yours. Her face went white. I don't know what your mother told me everything. She'd contacted Judge Harrison Caldwell. She was going to press charges. I let each word fall like a hammer. She told me the week before she passed away. Said she was doing it because she loved you, because you needed to learn consequences. Rebecca stood up so fast her chair rocked. How do you know about that? I looked at her. Really looked at her. Your mother told me everything. The lie came easy. Helen hadn't told me she'd written it in her journal, documented it for Dr. Brennan, but they didn't need to know that. She told you, Rebecca's voice was shrill, and when you said you didn't know anything. I said a lot of things. I kept my voice steady. Confused old man, grief-stricken widower, can't think straight, can't remember passwords, needs help managing his affairs. Trevor moved closer. His cologne was overwhelming. Old man, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I met his eyes. I know Helen caught you stealing. Both times. First 150,000. She forgave that one. Used her mother's inheritance to pay your gambling debts. Trevor's hand clenched into a fist. Then you did it again. $340,000 from her father's investment account. The money she'd saved for 30 years. Vernon Pike stood up. Mr. Whitfield, I think I should leave. Sit down, Vernon. My voice was steel. You're part of this. Power of attorney. Quit claim deed. Healthcare directive. 3 documents designed to give them complete control over everything Helen and I built. He sat. Helen wasn't going to let it go the second time. She called Judge Caldwell. She was filing charges. Embezzlement. Fraud. Forgery. I looked at Rebecca. You would have gone to prison. Stop it. Her voice broke. Just stop. But then Helen got sick. How convenient. Started feeling weak in January. By March, she could barely stand. April, she collapsed in the garden. I let the words hang in the air. The doctor said stroke. Natural causes. Case closed. You're confused, Trevor said. His voice was dangerous now. Flat. Grief is making you paranoid. Am I? I reached into my pocket, not for the recording device that would give everything away, just a gesture, a threat. Because Dr. Charles Brennan called me 1 week after the funeral, said there was something wrong with Helen's blood work. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth, said someone should have caught it earlier, asked if I'd noticed anything strange in the weeks before she passed away. Vernon Pike was halfway to the door. Sit down, Vernon. You're going to want to hear this. He froze. I told Dr. Brennan about the tea, about how Helen said it tasted bitter, about how Rebecca brought tea every Sunday, always from that special shop she liked. I turned to my daughter. What was in that tea, Rebecca? Nothing. This is insane. Dad, you're not well. The grief is. I'm not the one who's not well. I stood up, not needing the cane anymore. Let them see me strong, clear-eyed, dangerous. Helen was poisoned, slowly, over months. Someone who had access to her food, her medication, someone who visited every week. Trevor stepped forward. His face was dark with rage. Old man, you don't know what you're talking about. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the expensive watch bought with stolen money, at the cologne meant to cover the smell of desperation, at the hands that had held my wife's medication bottle. I don't know, I said quietly. I know about the digoxin. Before I reveal what I did next, I need to know something. If you're still here with me, if you can feel the tension building, drop the number 1 in the comments so I know you haven't looked away. Because what happens in the next few minutes changes everything. And one more thing, parts of what you're about to hear are heightened for storytelling impact. Some details have been shaped for dramatic and educational purposes. If this kind of intensity isn't for you, this is your moment to step away. The word digoxin hung in the air like a gunshot. The room froze. Trevor's face went white. Rebecca's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vernon Pike's hand was still on his briefcase handle halfway to standing. I kept my voice calm, steady. I know you refilled Helen's digoxin prescription 7 times in 6 months. Let that sink in. Watched their faces. At 3 different pharmacies across Richmond. Trevor's jaw clenched. CVS on West Broad Street. Walgreens on Monument Avenue. Rite Aid in Carytown. I pointed at Rebecca. All under your name. Each pharmacy name landed like a blow. Rebecca took a step backward, her hand reaching for the wall. I know that medication was found in her blood at levels 4 to 5 times higher than normal. My voice was still calm, but something had shifted in the room. The air felt heavy, dangerous. Doctor, Brennan prescribed 0.25 milligrams once daily. Helen's blood showed 8.3 nanograms per milliliter. That's not an accident. Vernon Pike set his briefcase down slowly. His face had gone gray. She was poisoned. Slowly. Deliberately. Over 6 months. Small amounts added to her tea, to her food. Enough to mimic natural causes. Trevor's hands clenched into fists. You can't prove anything. You're just a confused old man making wild accusations. Grief does that. Makes people paranoid. His voice was smooth, practiced. Rebecca's laugh came out shrill. "Aw, Dad, please. You're not well. No one will believe you." Maybe not. I reached slowly into my jacket pocket. Trevor tensed, fighter's stance, ready to move. I pulled out the recording device, small, black, size of a lighter, held it up between my thumb and forefinger, pointed to the small red light blinking steadily on its side. But they'll believe this. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then comprehension dawned on their faces. Trevor's face flushed crimson. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. Vernon Pike took a step toward the door. "You recorded us." Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "Everything," I said. "The coffee this morning, the documents, your conversation at 2 a.m., every single word." Absolute silence. Then Trevor moved. He was fast, terrifyingly fast. He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands closed around my throat. The impact drove me backward. My cane clattered to the floor. My back hit the wall picture frames, rattling. "You stupid old man!" His face was inches from mine, twisted with rage. "You think you can trap us?" I couldn't breathe. My hands clawed at his fingers, but he was too strong. His grip was iron, 20 years younger, 40 pounds heavier, desperate. "All you had to do was sign." His voice was raw animal. "Sought to play the confused old widower, sign the papers, and fade away." The recording device fell from my hand. I heard it skitter across the hardwood floor, sliding toward the fireplace. My vision started to narrow, black spots dancing at the edges. I heard Rebecca screaming, but the sound seemed far away. Trevor's cologne was overwhelming. His Rolex pressed cold against my neck as his grip tightened. We needed that money. His breath was hot on my face. Dominic would have ended me. My lungs burned, fire in my chest. My throat was being crushed. 20 years in the Air Force. 2 combat deployments in hostile territory. I'd survived surface-to-air missiles, equipment failures at 30,000 feet. I wasn't going to die in my own living room. I brought my knee up, hard, fast, military training overriding panic. Trevor grunted. His grip loosened for just a second, half a second, but it was enough. I sucked in half a breath before his hands tightened again. You should have stayed confused. His voice was breaking now. Raw, desperate. You should have just signed the papers and passed away quietly like Helen. The words hit harder than his hands. Like Helen. He'd just said it. Out loud. With witnesses. He'd just confessed. On tape. My vision was going dark. The edges closing in like a tunnel. Everything narrowing to Trevor's rage-twisted face and Rebecca's voice high and panicked somewhere behind him. Trevor, stop. You're going to hurt him. That's the point. Vernon Pike's voice, distant. This is insane. I'm leaving. My vision tunneled. Trevor's face started to fade. The pressure on my throat was overwhelming. Everything started going dark. Then I heard an explosion. Voices, so many voices. Footsteps like thunder. Hands grabbed Trevor, yanking him backward. His grip on my throat released. I collapsed, gasping. Police, nobody move! My vision swam. Blurred shapes in tactical gear. Black uniforms, weapons drawn. So many of them flooding into my living room. Someone slammed Trevor face down onto the hardwood floor. A knee pressed into his back. Metal clicked handcuffs snapping shut. Trevor Hartley, you are under arrest for assault and battery attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Rebecca screamed. You can't do this. He's lying. This is entrapment. An officer, a woman young professional, moved toward her with handcuffs ready. Ma'am, put your hands behind your back. No, you don't understand. That old man set us up. Hands behind your back. Now. I was sitting on my couch. When had I gotten to the couch? Someone, a paramedic in blue, was shining a light in my eyes. How many fingers am I holding up? 3. I rasped. My throat felt like broken glass. Detective Christopher Blake stepped through the chaos badge clipped to his belt. His face was calm, professional, but his eyes held satisfaction. He walked to where the recording device had fallen near the fireplace, bent down, picked it up carefully. The red light still blinked. Blake pressed a button. The room fell silent as my voice filled the space. I know about the digoxin. Rebecca's recorded laugh. No one will believe you. Trevor's voice, thick with rage. You stupid old man. The sound of struggle. My gasping. Trevor's confession clear as a bell. You should have just signed and passed away quietly like Helen. Blake stopped the playback. Looked at Rebecca, who'd gone very still. Rebecca Hartley. Blake said, his voice carrying official authority. You are under arrest for the murder of Helen Whitfield. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Rebecca's face crumpled. Daddy, please, I didn't mean to. Trevor made me. He said we had no choice. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Blake turned to Trevor, who was being hauled to his feet by 2 officers. Trevor Hartley, you are under arrest for the murder of Helen Whitfield, assault and battery of Clayton Whitfield, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Trevor's face was purple with rage. This is bullshit. That recording is inadmissible. This is entrapment. Actually, Blake said calmly, you were acting as a private citizen documenting a crime in progress. Perfectly legal. And you just confessed on tape. With multiple witnesses. in front of a licensed attorney. Vernon Pike was still in the corner, hands raised, looking like he wanted to disappear. They led Trevor and Rebecca out in separate directions. Rebecca was crying. Trevor was shouting about lawyers and rights. Officers guided them through my front door out onto Monument Avenue where neighbors had gathered. I watched from my porch, a paramedic's hands still gentle on my throat. "Bruised," she said. "Windpipe intact. Lucky. 2 separate police cars. Standard procedure. Keep the suspects apart." Trevor went in the first car, still shouting. Rebecca in the second, silent now, staring at nothing. The neighbors watched. Mrs. Patterson from next door. The Johnsons from across the street. All of them staring, phones out, recording. The modern way of bearing witness. The police cars pulled away, lights flashing red and blue against the evening sky. Then it was just me and the crime scene techs and Detective Blake standing in my living room that no longer felt like home. "You should get that throat checked at the hospital," Blake said. "I'm fine." He didn't argue, just handed me a card. "My direct line. You'll need to come in tomorrow. Give a formal statement. But tonight, you should rest." Rest in the house where Helen passed away, where my daughter had planned my murder. "I'll stay with Gerald," I heard myself say. Blake nodded. "Good. Don't stay here alone tonight." He left. The techs left. Eventually, everyone left. I stood in my empty living room as the sun set, painting the walls orange and purple. 3 days later, Detective Blake came back. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where Helen had discovered the first theft 2 years ago, and laid out a manila folder. "We found something else during the investigation," he said carefully. He pulled out photographs. A small house in Arlington. A woman young, maybe 28, standing on the porch. Pretty, blonde, nothing like Rebecca. "Trevor had a mistress," Blake said. "He used $140,000 of the stolen money to buy this house for her. Put it in her name. He was planning to leave Rebecca after he collected the insurance money." My stomach turned. Only $200,000 went to Dominic Russo to pay off the gambling debts. The rest, $140,000, went to this woman. Rebecca had no idea. "She killed her mother for him," I said slowly. "And he was going to leave her anyway." Blake nodded. "She killed her mother for a man who was already planning his exit. Helen passed away for nothing. Less than nothing. For a lie wrapped inside another lie." I sat in my empty house that night, the house Helen and I had bought 37 years ago. The house we'd filled with memories and love, and a daughter who'd grown up to poison her own mother. Rebecca had killed Helen for a man who'd already bought a house for someone else. Helen had passed away for a number, for money that was already spent, for a betrayal stacked on top of another betrayal. She passed away for nothing at all. The weeks after the arrest blurred together like a fever dream. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt Trevor's hands around my throat. Smelled his cologne. Heard Rebecca's voice, "Daddy, please." I couldn't eat. Gerald Thompson brought casseroles from the church ladies. They sat untouched in my refrigerator until they spoiled. The anger consumed me. It burned through my chest, like acid eating away at everything, until there was nothing left but rage. Gerald found me one afternoon, sitting in Helen's chair. I hadn't showered in 3 days, hadn't changed clothes. "Clayton." His voice was gentle but firm. "You need help, brother. Professional help. This anger is going to kill you." "Good," I said. "No." He pulled up a chair. "Not good. Helen wouldn't want this. She'd want you to survive, to heal." "How?" The word came out raw, How do I live knowing my daughter poisoned her mother? Knowing I didn't listen when Helen tried to warn me? Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Then, you get help. You talk to someone who knows how to handle trauma. 2 days later, I found myself in an office on the west side of Richmond. A woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and graying hair sat across from me. "I'm Dr. Laura Brennan," she said. "I specialize in trauma counseling, grief, family betrayal." So I told her, all of it. Helen's collapse, the funeral, the investigation, Trevor's hands around my throat, Rebecca being led away in handcuffs. When I finished, she was quiet. "What's the hardest part?" she finally asked. I should have listened to Helen. The words burst out of me. 5 years ago, she warned me about Trevor. She knew, and I dismissed her. Tell me about that. 5 years ago, it had been a Thursday evening in late September. Rebecca wanted to bring someone home for dinner. Someone special. Trevor Hartley walked into our house wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Expensive watch. That cologne that made my eyes water. He shook my hand too firmly, held it too long. Smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. Helen made pot roast. Her specialty. Trevor complimented everything, asked all the right questions about my Air Force career, about Helen's work with Judge Caldwell. He was smooth, practiced. After they left, Helen pulled me into the kitchen. Her face was troubled. "I don't trust him," she said. "You just met him." "I know. But something about him feels wrong. His eyes are cold. He looks at Rebecca like she's an asset, not a person." "You're being overprotective," I'd said. "Rebecca's a grown woman." Clayton. She'd grabbed my arm, her grip tight. My gut is telling me this man is going to hurt her, hurt us." "Your gut isn't always right, honey." But it had been. Helen's gut had been screaming danger, and I'd told her she was imagining things. Back in Dr. Brennan's office, tears ran down my face. "I chose peace over protection," I said. Helen passed away, knowing I didn't believe her. Didn't trust her judgment. "Mr. Whitfield." Dr. Brennan leaned forward. "You couldn't have known Trevor would become a man who would harm someone. Intuition isn't the same as evidence. But I could have tried. I could have asked questions, done background checks, something. And now Helen is gone. Rebecca is in jail awaiting trial. And I have to testify against my own daughter." My voice broke. "How do I do that?" "You're not testifying against Rebecca," Dr. Brennan said gently. "You're testifying for Helen, for justice, for the truth. There's a difference." Over the following weeks, I went back to Dr. Brennan's office. We talked about guilt, about grief, about the complexity of loving someone who's done something unforgivable. "You can mourn the daughter you thought you had," she told me, while still holding accountable the woman she became. 8 months passed. 8 months of therapy, of nightmares, of prosecutors visiting my house, preparing me to testify. They showed me evidence, walked me through what questions would be asked. "She'll likely try to make eye contact," the lead prosecutor warned me. "To play on your emotions. It's a common defense tactic." I visited Helen's grave every week, sat on the bench under the oak tree, and talked to her. "I got them, honey," I'd say. "I'm getting justice for you. I'm so sorry I didn't listen, but I'm making it right now. I promise." Gerald came with me most times, didn't say much. Just stood there solid and present, a reminder that I wasn't alone. The prosecutors were thorough. We went over my testimony again and again until I could recite it in my sleep. The pharmacy records, Helen's journal entries, the recording of Trevor's confession. "And you were extraordinarily brave, Mr. Whitfield," the lead prosecutor told me. I didn't feel brave. I felt old, tired, broken. But I'd made a promise to Helen, and I was going to keep it. 8 months after the arrest on a cold February morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and straightened my tie. The same black suit I'd worn to Helen's funeral, the same white shirt, the same black shoes. Gerald waited downstairs. He'd offered to drive me. I'd accepted. "You ready?" he asked when I came down. "No," I said. "But it doesn't matter." We drove to the Richmond County Courthouse in silence. The building loomed ahead, gray stone and white columns, the weight of justice pressing down from every angle. I climbed the steps slowly. Gerald walked beside me. This time I wasn't burying my wife. I was burying my daughter. The Richmond County Courthouse rose before me like a monument to justice or judgment. Gray stone, white columns, heavy doors that had swung open for countless trials over the past century and a half. Gerald walked beside me up those steps, his hand on my elbow steadying me, even though I didn't need it. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Media in the back rows, cameras prohibited, but notebooks out, pens ready. I recognized faces from the neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson, the Johnsons, people who'd brought casseroles after Helen passed away now here to watch me testify against my daughter. The judge's bench sat elevated at the front, imposing. To the left, the jury box held 12 faces, 7 women, 5 men, strangers, who would decide my daughter's fate. The prosecution table on the right, 2 defense tables on the left, separated by several feet. Rebecca at one, Trevor at the other. Separate trials, the prosecutor had explained, but conducted simultaneously for efficiency. Same evidence, same witnesses. 2 juries hearing the same story, reaching their own conclusions. I took my seat in the gallery, waited. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, entered. Everyone stood, sat. The machinery of justice grinding into motion. The first time I testified was about Helen's final months. The bailiff led me to the witness stand, his hand gentle on my elbow, like I might break. I placed my hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" I looked at Rebecca. She sat rigid at the defense table, hands folded, eyes down. She wouldn't look at me. "I swear." The lead prosecutor, a woman named Jennifer Davis, mid-40s, sharp and professional, approached. "Mr. Whitfield, can you describe your wife's condition in the months before she passed away?" I took a breath. Thought about Helen sitting at our kitchen table, confused about what day it was, about her stumbling in the hallway, grabbing the wall for support. She was weak, confused. She'd forget things, simple things like whether she'd taken her medication. She complained about feeling dizzy, nauseous. My voice caught. She said the tea tasted wrong, bitter but also sweet, like someone was trying to mask a bad flavor. And who brought her tea during this period? Rebecca, my daughter. She visited every Sunday for 6 months. Always brought tea from a shop she liked. Did you think anything was suspicious at the time? No. The word came out hollow. I thought Helen was being paranoid, getting old. I didn't listen. 3 days later, I was back on that witness stand. This time, Ms. Davis asked about money. "Mr. Whitfield, were you aware of any financial discrepancies in your wife's accounts?" 2 incidents. The first was 2 years ago. $150,000 missing from our joint savings. Helen traced it to Rebecca. Forged signatures. Forged authorization forms. What happened? Helen forgave her, used her mother's inheritance to cover the debt. Rebecca promised it would never happen again. And did it happen again? Yes. 1 year ago. $340,000 from Helen's personal investment account. Money she'd inherited from her father. The courtroom was silent. Even the Whitfields had stopped writing. What did Helen do? She called Judge Harrison Caldwell, her employer. She was filing criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, forgery. Ms. Davis nodded. And when did Helen pass away? 6 months later. She let that timeline hang in the air. 6 months after deciding to press charges, Helen was dead. My final testimony was the hardest. A week into the trial, Ms. Davis walked me through the day of the confrontation. Tell the jury what happened at the funeral reception. I overheard Trevor and Rebecca talking. They needed $560,000 by that Friday. Someone named Dominic Russo was threatening them. They were planning to pressure me into signing a power of attorney. What happened next? I went home. The front door was open. The house had been ransacked. They were trying to break into the wall safe in our bedroom. And that night, I heard them through the walls, planning. Rebecca said I was confused, that I didn't suspect them. Trevor talked about how old people have accidents, falls, heart attacks. Rebecca's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, hearsay. The judge looked at me. Mr. Whitfield, did you record this conversation? Yes, Your Honor. Objection overruled. The recording will be entered as evidence. The prosecution played the tape. The courtroom fell silent as Trevor's voice filled the space, cold and calculating. Old people have accidents, falls, heart attacks. No one questions it. Then my voice trembling, I know about the digoxin. The struggle, Trevor's rage, his confession, you should have just signed and passed away quietly, like Helen. When the recording ended, several jurors were crying. Rebecca sat with her head in her hands. Trevor stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The defense attorneys tried. They really tried. Rebecca's lawyer approached during cross-examination, his tone sympathetic. Mr. Whitfield, you've been through a terrible trauma. You're grieving. Isn't it possible your hearing aids malfunctioned, that you misheard? My hearing aids work perfectly, I said calmly. I heard every word. But grief can distort perception, make us see conspiracies where there's just tragedy. Grief didn't forge those checks, I said. Grief didn't refill digoxin prescriptions 7 times in 6 months at 3 different pharmacies. Grief didn't poison my wife. Trevor's lawyer took a different approach. Mr. Whitfield, isn't it true you entrapped my client? Set up an elaborate sting operation. I documented a crime in progress, I said, with the guidance of law enforcement. You wore a wire. You provoked him. I asked questions about my wife's death. He chose to attack me. He chose to confess. Then came Trevor's testimony. His lawyer tried to paint him as a victim, but Trevor couldn't help himself. Couldn't resist shifting blame. Rebecca wanted her mother dead, he said from the stand, his voice flat. She came to me with the plan. Said we needed the insurance money. Said her mother was going to destroy her with those criminal charges. I just helped my wife. Rebecca's face went white. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Rebecca's defense rested on battered woman syndrome. Her lawyer presented photos, bruises on her arms, her ribs, her back. medical records documenting injuries over 3 years. My client was systematically abused, her lawyer argued, coerced, manipulated. Trevor Hartley controlled every aspect of her life, including this crime. The prosecution presented their rebuttal. Pharmacy records with Rebecca's signature, bank statements showing her accessing accounts. Helen's journal entries about Rebecca's visits, the tea, the strange taste. Judge Caldwell testified about Helen's call. She was frightened, but resolute. She said Rebecca had stolen from her twice, that she loved her daughter enough to teach her consequences. The trials lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of evidence, of testimony, of watching my daughter sit in that orange jumpsuit looking 20 years older than 36. Finally, the prosecution rested. The judge looked at Rebecca. The defendant may now present a victim impact statement. Rebecca stood slowly. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her frame. She'd lost weight. Her hair, once carefully styled, hung limp and greasy. Her eyes were hollow. She looked at me for the first time since the trial began, and I looked back at the stranger wearing my daughter's face. Rebecca stood slowly. She'd lost at least 20 pounds since the arrest, her frame thin and fragile beneath the prison uniform. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the defense table for support. The bailiff gestured toward the witness stand. She walked there on unsteady legs, each step seeming to take enormous effort. The courtroom fell silent. Even the Whitfields stopped writing, pens hovering over notebooks. She didn't sit, just stood there facing the judge, facing me. Our eyes met for the first time in weeks. Hers were red-rimmed, swollen from crying. Mine felt dry, empty, like I'd used up all my tears months ago. The judge nodded. "You may proceed, Ms. Hartley." Rebecca's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Dad." She stopped, swallowed, tried again. "Dad, I know the word sorry doesn't mean anything now. It's too small, too empty for what I've done." Her voice cracked. She gripped the railing in front of her, knuckles white. "I killed Mom. I killed the woman who gave me life, who forgave me once when I stole her money, who loved me unconditionally even when I didn't deserve it." A sob escaped her throat. She pressed her hand to her mouth, struggling for control. "Trevor manipulated me. Yes, he hit me, threatened me, controlled every aspect of my life. The photos you saw, those bruises, were real. The fear was real." She looked at Trevor's table. He sat motionless, face blank, staring at nothing. "But I still made the choice. I still put the poison in Mom's tea." The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the courtroom. Every Sunday, every single Sunday for 6 months, Mom welcomed me into her home, made me feel safe, hugged me goodbye. Her voice broke completely. And every time I was killing her, a little more each visit. Watching her get weaker, watching her forget things, watching her stumble and fall. Tears streamed down her face, now unchecked. She told me the tea tasted wrong, said it was bitter, and She couldn't continue for a moment. I told her she was imagining things, told her she was getting old, made her doubt her own mind while I poisoned her. I sat frozen in my seat. Gerald's hand found my shoulder, squeezed hard. I chose money over my mother. I chose a man who beat me over the woman who gave birth to me. I chose Trevor's gambling debts over my mother's life. She looked directly at me now, eyes pleading for something, forgiveness, understanding I didn't know. "This mistake, this sin, can never be fixed. There's no redemption for what I've done. No taking it back. No making it right. Her voice dropped to barely audible. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'll never deserve it. She wiped her face with her sleeve, the orange fabric rough against her skin. I just ask that you remember Mom the way she was. Don't remember how she died. Remember her smile, her kindness, her ability to forgive even when it hurt her. A pause, a breath, then, and Dad. She looked straight at me. I'm so sorry. I know you'll never forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. She broke down completely then, sobs racking her thin frame. The bailiff stepped forward, but she waved him away, stumbling back to her seat. Her lawyer put an arm around her shoulders as she buried her face in her hands. I sat there like stone, feeling nothing, feeling everything. Tears ran down my face, but I didn't wipe them away, just let them fall. Gerald's hand stayed on my shoulder, steady, solid. A reminder I wasn't alone in this. The closing arguments were brief. The prosecution laid out the evidence again, the digoxin refills the forged checks, the recording of Trevor's confession. A clear case of premeditated murder driven by greed. Rebecca's defense painted a picture of an abused woman, coerced and controlled, acting under duress. They didn't deny the crime, just asked for mercy in sentencing. Trevor's defense tried to shift all blame to Rebecca, painted him as a loving husband trying to help his troubled wife. But the recording destroyed that narrative, his own voice cold and calculating. You should have passed away quietly, like Helen. The juries deliberated for 2 days. On the third day, we were called back to the courtroom. The same packed gallery, the same media presence, the same weight of judgment pressing down on everyone. The judge entered. We stood, sat. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have your honor. My heart hammered against my ribs. Gerald sat beside me, solid and silent. In the matter of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Trevor Hartley on the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find guilty? Rebecca's shoulders shook with silent sobs. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder of Clayton Whitfield, guilty. Trevor's face remained blank, emotionless, like he'd expected this all along. The judge turned to the second jury. In the matter of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Rebecca Hartley on the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find a long pause? Then guilty. I closed my eyes, felt the words settle into my bones. 3 weeks later, we gathered again for sentencing. The judge looked at Trevor first. Mr. Hartley, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. Your actions were calculated, premeditated, and showed a complete disregard for human life. The court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Trevor's jaw clenched. Nothing else. No emotion. No reaction. The judge turned to Rebecca. Her face was softer now, more thoughtful. Ms. Hartley, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder. However, the court recognizes significant mitigating factors. Evidence of systematic abuse, coercion, manipulation, your genuine remorse and cooperation with law enforcement. Rebecca looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. The court sentences you to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. 25 years? My daughter would be 61 when she got out. If she got out. The courtroom erupted. Media scrambling. Trevor being led away in chains. Rebecca sobbing as the bailiffs approached. She looked at me one last time before they took her away. Mouthed something I couldn't hear. Maybe I'm sorry, maybe I love you, maybe nothing at all. Then she was gone. I walked out of that courthouse into the brilliant Virginia sunshine. Gerald walked beside me, silent. The steps seemed steeper than they had 3 weeks ago. The air felt heavier. "You okay?" Gerald asked quietly. I didn't answer right away, just stood there on the courthouse steps, feeling the sun on my face. "I don't feel victorious," I finally said. "I don't feel satisfied. I just feel empty, hollowed out, like someone scooped everything out of me and left just the shell." Gerald nodded, didn't try to fix it, didn't offer platitudes, just stood there beside me. Justice had been served. The killers had been convicted. Helen's murder had been avenged. But none of it brought her back, and none of it healed the hole where my family used to be. Before I tell you what happened after the verdict, I want to see who's still standing with me. If you've made it this far through the trial, the confession, the sentencing, comment the word justice below. I read every single one, and I want to know you're still here, because what came next, I never saw coming. And a brief note before we continue: certain elements in the next chapter are woven with narrative adjustments for reflection and storytelling depth. If this direction isn't something you wish to follow, you can step away now. The first night with baby Helen in my house was the longest night of my life. I'd driven home from that prison hospital with this tiny human strapped into a car seat I'd installed 3 times before I got it right. Gerald had come with me, sitting in the back seat next to the baby, his large hands hovering protectively near her the entire drive. We didn't talk, just listened to the small sounds she made, little sighs and whimpers that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. When we pulled into the driveway on Monument Avenue, I sat there for a moment, engine off, staring at the house. The last time I'd brought a baby home to this house, Helen had been beside me. We'd been young, scared, excited, full of hope about the future we were building together. Now I was 59 years old, alone, bringing home the granddaughter of the woman who'd been murdered in this very house. "You ready?" Gerald asked quietly. "No," I said. "But I don't think I'll ever be ready." We carried her inside. The nursery was ready. I'd spent weeks preparing it, painting the walls, that soft yellow, assembling furniture with Gerald's help. But standing there with an actual baby in my arms, the room suddenly felt inadequate. Too small. Too unprepared. Like I'd been playing house and now reality had arrived. Baby Helen started crying around midnight. I'd been dozing in the rocking chair beside her crib, afraid to leave her alone. The sound jolted me awake, that newborn cry that cut straight through everything else. I picked her up, cradling her against my chest, the way the nurses had shown me. She was so light, so fragile, her whole body fit in my 2 hands. "Shh," I whispered. "It's okay. Grandpa's here." Grandpa. The word felt strange in my mouth. I'd been grandpa for exactly 12 hours. She needed changing. I fumbled with the tiny diaper, my hands too large and clumsy. Took me 3 tries to get it fastened properly. Then she needed feeding. The bottle warmer the social worker had provided took forever to heat the formula to the right temperature. Baby Helen screamed the entire time, her face red, fists clenched. When I finally got the bottle to her lips, she latched on immediately. The crying stopped. The silence was stunning. I sat in that rocking chair, feeding this child in the middle of the night, and felt the weight of what I'd agreed to settle onto my shoulders. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a favor I was doing that would end in a few weeks or months. This was the rest of my life. This tiny human was now my responsibility. Mine to feed. Mine to protect. Mine to raise. I looked down at her face, eyes closed now, content, trusting. and I started crying. Quiet tears that ran down my face and dripped onto the blanket wrapped around her. Because I was terrified. Because I was exhausted. Because I missed Helen so much it physically hurt. Because this baby looked nothing like Trevor or Rebecca in this moment. She just looked like herself. Like possibility. Like hope I didn't know I still had. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered to her. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." But she just kept drinking her bottle, oblivious to my doubt. The first few weeks were brutal. Baby Helen woke every 2 hours. I'd just fall asleep and she'd start crying again. Feeding, changing, burping, repeat. My body ached in ways I'd forgotten were possible. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. I shuffled through the house like a zombie. Gerald came by every morning. Brought coffee, took over for a few hours so I could shower and sleep. Sometimes I'd wake up to find him walking circles around the living room, baby Helen against his shoulder, humming old Air Force marching songs. "You're a natural," I told him one morning. He smiled. "Had 3 kids of my own, remember this isn't my first rodeo." "How did you do it?" The sleepless nights. The constant worry. "You just do," he said simply. "Because they need you. Because giving up isn't an option." Doctor Laura Brennan started making house calls. Professional ethics probably didn't allow it, but she came anyway. Sat with me while I fed baby Helen. Let me talk through the fear and doubt. "Do you resent her?" she asked me one afternoon. I looked down at the baby in my arms. She was awake now, staring at me with those dark eyes, learning my face. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Sometimes I look at her, and I think about what Rebecca did, what Trevor did, and I feel this rage that this is my life now, that I'm starting over at 59 because my daughter murdered my wife. That's normal. But then she does something, makes a sound, grabs my finger, and I feel this overwhelming need to protect her, to make sure she never knows the darkness her parents created." "That's normal too," Dr. Brennan said. "You're allowed to feel both things, resentment and love, anger and hope. They can exist together." The hardest moments were the ones that caught me off guard. I'd be changing a diaper and suddenly remember Helen changing Rebecca's diapers in this same house. I'd be warming a bottle and think about Helen heating milk for Rebecca at 3 in the morning. I'd rock baby Helen to sleep and hear Helen's voice singing the lullabies she'd sung to our daughter. The ghosts were everywhere. One night around 3 weeks in, I was at my breaking point. Baby Helen had been crying for 2 hours straight. Nothing helped. Not feeding. Not changing. Not walking. Not rocking. She just screamed and screamed. I stood in the middle of the nursery, this wailing infant in my arms, and felt myself crumbling. "Please," I begged her. "Please stop crying. I don't know what you need. I don't know how to help you." She kept screaming. I called Gerald. "I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't." She won't stop crying, and I don't know what's wrong, and I'm so tired I can barely think straight. "I'm coming over," he said. "Right now." "Hang on, brother." He arrived 20 minutes later, took baby Helen from my arms, checked her temperature, looked in her mouth, felt her stomach. "She might have gas," he said, "or reflux. New babies do that sometimes." He showed me how to hold her upright against my shoulder, how to pat her back in a specific rhythm, how to apply gentle pressure to her stomach. After 15 minutes, she burped. A small sound, then quieted. The silence was deafening. I stared at Gerald. That's all it was, Gas. That's all it was. I sat down on the floor right there in the nursery, put my head in my hands, started laughing, couldn't stop. The laughter turned into sobs. Gerald sat down beside me, baby Helen asleep against his shoulder. "You're doing better than you think," he said quietly. "You're showing up. You're trying. That's what matters. What if I fail her? What if I mess this up the way I messed up with Rebecca?" "You didn't mess up with Rebecca. You loved her. You provided for her. You gave her every opportunity. She made her own choices. Bad choices. That's on her, not you." "But what if—" "Stop," Gerald cut me off. "This baby isn't Rebecca. She's not Trevor. She's herself. Her own person. And you get to help her become whoever she's meant to be. That's a gift, Clayton. Don't waste it on guilt." By week 6, we'd found a rhythm, baby Helen and I. She'd wake at 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. for feeding. I learned to sleep in short bursts between, learned which cry meant hunger, and which meant diaper, and which just meant she wanted to be held. I started taking her to Helen's grave on Sundays, strapped her into a carrier against my chest, and walked through Hollywood Cemetery to the oak tree where Helen rested. "This is your granddaughter," I told Helen's headstone. "She has your name, your eyes, I think. It's too early to tell for sure, but I see you in her." Baby Helen would make small sounds, content sounds, like she knew where we were. "I'm trying," I continued. "I'm tired and scared, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm trying. For you. For her." The white azaleas along the walkway at home were still dead. I couldn't bring myself to replant them. But one morning I noticed small green shoots coming up through the soil. New growth. The bulbs had survived underground through winter and grief and everything else. I took it as a sign. 3 months in, baby Helen smiled at me for the first time. A real smile, not gas, not reflex. A genuine smile directed at my face. I was changing her diaper, making silly faces the way I'd seen parents do. And she smiled. This toothless, gummy smile that lit up her whole face. Something in my chest cracked open, the wall I'd built around my heart. The armor I'd worn since Helen's death. It cracked, and warmth flooded through. "There you are," I whispered. "There's my girl." I called Gerald immediately. She smiled at me. She actually smiled. He laughed. "That's good, brother. That's real good." That night I sat in the rocking chair with baby Helen asleep against my chest. The house was quiet, peaceful for the first time in months. I looked down at her perfect face and realized something fundamental had shifted. I'd stopped seeing Rebecca when I looked at her, stopped seeing Trevor, stopped seeing the murder and betrayal and pain. I just saw her. Helen. My granddaughter. This innocent life that had been given to me for reasons I still didn't fully understand. "We're going to be okay," I whispered to her. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to figure this out together." She sighed in her sleep. Tiny fingers curled against my shirt, and for the first time since Helen's death, I believed my own words. We were going to be okay. The weeks after Rebecca's release were the strangest of my life. Stranger than the trial, stranger than the arrest, stranger even than those first terrifying nights with baby Helen 15 years ago. Because now I had 3 people living under one roof who were connected by blood, but separated by an ocean of pain. Me, my daughter who'd murdered my wife, and the granddaughter caught between us. Rebecca took the guest room, the same room I'd hidden in the night Trevor, and she had ransacked the house. I'd offered it without emotion, showing her where the towels were kept, how the shower worked. Like she was a stranger renting a room, not my daughter coming home after 15 years in prison. That first week, we moved around each other like ghosts. Rebecca woke early, made coffee, quietly sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper like she was afraid to make noise. I'd come down an hour later, nod, pour my own coffee. We didn't speak unless necessary. Helen was the bridge between us. She'd come downstairs for breakfast, kiss my cheek, morning grandpa, then pause awkwardly near Rebecca. Morning. Mom. The word mom sounded foreign in her mouth. Forced, like speaking a language she'd studied but never truly learned. Rebecca's face would light up every time Helen spoke to her. Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well? Fine. Helen would grab cereal, eat quickly, retreat to her room. I watched these interactions with a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because Helen deserved better than this fractured family. Relief because she wasn't rushing into Rebecca's arms, wasn't forgetting what had been done. 2 weeks in, I found Rebecca crying in the kitchen at 2 a.m. I'd come down for water, saw her sitting in the dark, shoulders shaking. I stood in the doorway, uncertain. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me wanted to walk away, let her sit with her grief the way Helen had sat with hers, in that garden poisoned and alone. I'm sorry, Rebecca whispered, sensing my presence. I couldn't sleep. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I filled my glass at the sink, started to leave, then stopped. What's wrong? Everything. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I missed everything, Dad. Her first word, her first step, first day of school, first lost tooth. 15 years of my daughter's life gone. And it's my fault. All of it. I sat down across from her, not close, maintaining distance. Yes, I said simply. It is your fault. She flinched but nodded. I know. I see her and she's so beautiful, so smart, so kind, and I had nothing to do with that. You raised her. You made her who she is. I'm nobody to her. You're her mother. Biology doesn't make you a parent. You taught me that. Her voice broke. You've been more of a mother to her than I ever was. The silence stretched between us. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a car drove past. You want to know the hardest part, I said finally. It's not the anger. I can handle anger. It's the grief for who you used to be. I mourn the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who'd climb in my lap and ask me to read her stories. That Rebecca is gone. She died the day you put poison in your mother's tea. Rebecca's sobbing intensified. I know, and I can never bring her back. No, you can't. But maybe you can become someone new, someone Helen can learn to trust. Someday. If you earn it. She looked up at me, eyes desperate. And how do I earn that? By showing up, by being honest, by never ever asking for more than she's willing to give. I stood glass in hand. And by understanding that she might never be willing to give you anything at all. And that's her right. You don't get to demand forgiveness. You don't get to demand a relationship. You gave up those rights when you made your choices. I left her sitting there in the dark. Gerald came by more frequently now, checking on me, checking on the situation. How's it going? He asked one afternoon. We were on the porch watching Helen shoot hoops in the driveway. Rebecca sat on the front steps watching too, keeping her distance. It's complicated, I said. Life usually is. I thought I'd feel angrier, having her here, in Helen's house, breathing Helen's air, but mostly I just feel tired. Gerald nodded. Rage takes energy. You've been running on rage and grief for 15 years. Maybe your body's just done fighting. Or maybe I'm getting old. That too. He smiled. But seriously, Clayton, you've done an incredible thing. Raising Helen, bringing Rebecca home, trying to build something from the wreckage. Not many men could do that. I'm not doing it for Rebecca. I'm doing it for Helen, the young one. She deserves a chance to know her mother if she wants it. I won't be the one who takes that choice away from her. That's what I mean. You're putting that girl first, above your own pain. That takes strength. Down in the driveway, Helen made a basket. Rebecca clapped softly. Helen glanced at her, almost smiled, then went back to shooting. Small moments. That's what we were building. Small, careful moments. A month after Rebecca's release, Helen came to me with a question. We were in the garden together, tending the white roses that had finally grown back full and healthy. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think people can change, like really change, fundamentally? I sat back on my heels, studying her face. 15 years old, so much older than her years. Why do you ask? Mom keeps apologizing, keeps saying she's different now. That prison changed her, that she's sorry for what she did. Helen pulled a weed, tossed it aside. But how do you know if someone's really changed, or if they're just saying what you want to hear? This was it, the question I'd been waiting for, the one that would shape how Helen saw the world going forward. I think people can change, I said carefully. But change isn't just words. It's actions. Consistent actions over time. Your mom can say she's sorry every day for the rest of her life. But what matters is what she does. How she treats you. How she treats herself. Whether she takes responsibility or makes excuses. So I should. What, test her? No. You should protect yourself. Keep healthy boundaries. Let her earn your trust slowly if she can. But don't feel obligated to give her anything you're not ready to give. Helen was quiet for a moment. Do you forgive her? The question hit harder than I expected. Did I forgive Rebecca? I'm working on it, I said honestly. Some days are easier than others. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I can forgive her and still remember what she did. Still protect myself, still keep boundaries. That makes sense. Helen went back to weeding. I don't think I forgive her yet. Is that okay? That's more than okay. That's healthy. Good, because I don't want to lie about how I feel. Never lie about how you feel, sweetheart. Not to make someone else comfortable. Your feelings are valid. Always. She smiled at me, that smile that looked so much like Helen, my Helen, that sometimes it hurt to see it. 3 months in, something shifted. Small at first, almost imperceptible. Rebecca got a job at a local grocery store. Stocking shelves, minimum wage. She'd leave early, come home tired, never complaining. She started attending a support group for formerly incarcerated women. Came home with pamphlets about rebuilding your life, making amends, staying clean. She asked Helen if she could attend her school play. Helen hesitated, then said yes. Rebecca sat in the back row, cried through the entire performance, clapped until her hands were red. She asked me if she could tend Helen's grave. I said yes. Every Sunday, she'd walk to Hollywood Cemetery, clean the headstone, leave fresh flowers. She never asked to come with Helen and me, just went on her own time. Quiet penance. One evening, I came home from the hardware store to find Rebecca and Helen in the kitchen together. Rebecca was teaching Helen how to make pot roast, the same recipe Helen had made. My Helen. They didn't see me at first. I stood in the doorway watching. So you add the carrots here, Rebecca was saying. And Grandma always said the secret was the bay leaves, 2 of them, no more, no less. Young Helen laughed. That's so specific. Grandma was specific about everything. Her recipes were like engineering blueprints. Precise. Perfect. Rebecca's voice was warm, nostalgic, not bitter, not angry, just remembering. Tell me more about her, Helen said softly. Grandpa tells me stories, but I want to hear yours too. Rebecca paused, hands still on the cutting board. Are you sure? Yeah, I want to know what she was like. As a mom. Your mom. They sat down at the table pot roast, temporarily forgotten, and Rebecca started talking. She was patient, so patient. I remember when I was 7, I wanted to learn to braid hair. She sat with me for hours, letting me practice on her. I pulled her hair, made horrible tangles. She never complained, just kept encouraging me. Helen leaned forward, listening intently. And she was funny. People didn't always see that. She had this dry sense of humor. She'd say these things with a completely straight face, and you wouldn't realize she'd made a joke until 5 minutes later. They talked for an hour. I stayed in the doorway listening, hearing Rebecca talk about Helen, the good parts, the beautiful parts, the parts worth remembering. When they finally noticed me, I'd been crying. Grandpa! Helen stood concerned. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just remembering. Rebecca looked at me. Our eyes met. And for the first time in 15 years, I saw my daughter. Not the murderer. Not the convict. Not the stranger. My daughter. Broken. Trying. Rebuilding herself piece by piece. I nodded slightly. She nodded back. A truce. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acknowledgement. Recognition that we were both trying. Both surviving. Both doing our best with the wreckage we'd been left. That night, the 3 of us ate pot roast together. The recipe Helen had perfected over 37 years of marriage. It tasted exactly right. Exactly like home. This is perfect, young Helen said. Just like Grandpa described. Rebecca smiled, so Grandma would be proud. And maybe, just maybe, she would be. 6 months after Rebecca's release, I found her on the porch one evening. She was reading a book on accounting, trying to rebuild skills she'd lost during 15 years inside. I sat down beside her. We watched the sunset paint the Virginia sky in shades of orange and purple. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For raising her. For giving her everything I couldn't. For not poisoning her against me. I didn't do it for you. I know. You did it for her. And for Mom. She closed her book. But still, thank you. We sat in silence as the light faded, and in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. Someday, if she kept showing up, if she kept trying, if she kept being honest, maybe someday we could be a family again. A different kind of family. Broken and rebuilt. Scarred but healing. Not the family we'd been, but the family we were becoming. Before I leave you tonight, I want to speak plainly, not as a man who survived a courtroom battle, not as a widower, not even as a grandfather, but as someone who learned too late what truly matters. Pain does not automatically make you wise. Sometimes it only makes you quieter. Sometimes it convinces you to tolerate what should never be tolerated. I tolerated warning signs. I dismissed instincts. I chose comfort over confrontation. And that choice cost Helen her life. If there is one lesson buried inside this family story, it is this: when someone who loves you sees danger, do not silence them just because the truth is inconvenient. Helen sensed something in Trevor long before I did. She told me he looked at people like transactions. She told me her stomach tightened when he smiled. I told her she was overprotective. I told her we should give him time. Do not be like me. Love is not passive. Love protects. Love investigates. Love asks hard questions when something feels off. I thought keeping peace made me strong. In reality, I was avoiding discomfort, and avoidance is not strength, it is delay. For decades, I believed I understood foundations. I spent 20 years in the Air Force learning how to identify structural weaknesses. I spent 25 years in construction, making sure buildings would not collapse under pressure. Yet inside my own home, the fault lines spread quietly, and I chose not to measure them. This family story did not explode in a single moment. It eroded slowly. A stolen sum forgiven too quickly. A promise accepted without accountability. A pattern excused as stress. When boundaries are softened repeatedly, they eventually disappear. And when they disappear, damage follows. I live with regret. Not because I committed the crime. I did not. But because I underestimated what neglecting early warnings can cost. Regret is heavy. It does not disappear after sentencing. It does not fade because justice is delivered. It settles into your chest and reminds you daily of what could have been different. But regret can also reshape you. Raising my granddaughter became my refusal to let tragedy define the next chapter. When she calls me grandpa, when she laughs in the garden where her grandmother once stood, I am reminded that legacy is not determined by the worst decision in a family story. It is determined by what you choose to build afterward. If you have ever watched grandpa stories and assumed they were simple reflections about aging and nostalgia, understand something deeper. Sometimes grandpa stories are written in hospital corridors and courtroom benches. Sometimes they are shaped by betrayal, responsibility, and second chances. They are not always gentle, but they are honest about consequences. There were nights when I sat alone and asked why any of this happened. I will not pretend to understand divine plans, but I believe God allowed me to raise that child for a reason, not to erase the past, but to prevent its repetition. Redemption is not about rewriting history. It is about refusing to pass damage forward. Do not confuse forgiveness with forgetting. Forgiveness for me meant acknowledging every wound while refusing to let hatred become my permanent identity. Hatred is seductive. It feels powerful, but it imprisons you just as surely as iron bars. If someone in your life feels wrong to you, if something in your gut whispers caution, listen. Investigate. Protect the vulnerable before circumstances force your hand. There is no award for being the most patient victim of manipulation. This family story taught me that blood does not equal loyalty. That shared DNA does not guarantee shared values. That sometimes protecting the innocent means standing against your own child. That is not a lesson I ever wanted to learn. And yet here I am telling you. If you are listening to these grandpa stories, ask yourself something difficult. Where are you choosing comfort over clarity? Where are you overlooking small betrayals because confronting them feels exhausting? Where are you assuming things will correct themselves without action? They rarely do. Silence does not repair fractures. It hides them until the collapse is unavoidable. When my granddaughter turned 15, she asked me whether I would do anything differently if I could go back. I told her yes. I would have listened sooner. I would have demanded accountability at the first sign of theft. I would have valued discomfort over denial. Do not wait for a hospital room to validate your instincts. Do not wait for legal consequences to confirm what your heart already knows. And do not believe that maintaining appearances is more important than protecting the people you love. The greatest inheritance you can give the next generation is not money. It is courage. courage to confront wrongdoing, courage to admit mistakes, courage to rebuild after devastation. If this family story has shown you anything, I hope it is that justice through lawful means is stronger than revenge. My so-called revenge was not violence. It was documentation. It was testimony. It was accountability. And my deeper victory was choosing love for an innocent child, rather than bitterness toward her parents. When I sit on the porch at sunset now, my granddaughter beside me, I understand that survival is not enough. Growth is the goal. Breaking cycles is the mission. Protecting innocence is the responsibility. If this message resonates with you, share your thoughts below. Would you have testified against your own child? Would you have raised that baby? I read your reflections carefully, and they matter more than you know. If these grandpa stories speak to your heart, consider sharing this with someone who might need encouragement, and subscribe if you want to continue exploring difficult lessons and quiet resilience together. Thank you for staying until the very end. And a gentle reminder, some upcoming stories include dramatized elements shaped for reflection and education. If that storytelling approach does not align with you, feel free to choose content that better fits your preferences.